Well, thank you again for joining us here today, Closing the Gap financial initiative here that we launched. Last week was our first week. This is our second week. Really happy to be a part of this. I want to take this time to briefly acknowledge Emil Ekior, InnoPower, Robert Shagag of the Recorder, they've done a tremendous job of just trying to get this off the ground. We've had a number of conversations on why this is bringing us here today, and just moving forward, we want to be able to provide some research. Last week was our first week for those in need. We do recognize the fact that when there are natural disasters out there, economic disaster, whatever it may be, Black and Brown communities are affected far more substantially than any of the other communities. They feel the brunt of that impact, and we've seen this wealth gap grow over this during this entire time during the pandemic. We're on the backside of that and coming out of it, but having said that, we still need some of these resources in our community to better serve them. So want to make sure we're always cognizant of that, sensitive to those needs, and here today to just provide some intellectual conversation, some education, and hopefully be of value and resource to our listeners and our viewers. Again, thank you to Emil Ekior, Robert Shagag. I want to thank Northwestern Mutual and Wise Financial for being part of this, and really great thanks, and really grateful for having our panelists here today. I'll go through some intros here. Mr. Willis Bright will join us here today. He has been very influential throughout his career. Has really been influential in an Urban League initiative, Black business development, amongst many others. Mr. Willis Bright, if you care to share a few opening remarks here today.
You're muted, Willis.
I believe you might be muted, Mr. Bright. Black business development.
Can you hear me now?
Amongst many others.
Okay.
Yes, sir. There you are. Care to share a few opening
Willis
remarks
Bright.
today?
I am chair of the African American Coalition of Indianapolis. I have a business, Brightvisions Inc.
I believe you might be
organizational development work. And I have been involved with multiple community groups. Can you hear me now? Involved in entrepreneurship education for years. I'll say more about all of those involvements a little later. Thanks. I have a business, Brightvisions Inc.
I believe you might be
organizational development work. And I have been involved with multiple community groups. Can you hear me now? Involved in entrepreneurship education for years. I'll say more about all of those involvements a little later. Thanks.
Am I the only one hearing that?
Brightvisions
Inc. Can you guys hear that feedback? We're clearly having some technical difficulties. Technology is great when it works. It is not working right now.
Yeah, I'm getting a lot
of feedback.
Yeah.
If our viewers are listening and with us, please bear with us one moment. Can you guys hear that feedback? We're clearly having some technical difficulties. Technology is great when it works. It is not working right now.
Yeah, I'm getting a lot of. Can you still hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, I have cut my speakers down to see if that helps.
Okay. Let's go for it. Let's give it another shot. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, Mr. Bright, would you like to share again, and I'll put myself on mute, and if we can all go on mute while you're sharing, and yeah, Mr. Bright, maybe turn your speakers down, that might be helpful.
Sure. Okay, can you hear me now? Okay, good. I'm Willis Bright.
Let's go for it.
I am the president of Brightvisions Inc., a management consulting company, organizational development, strategic planning. I'm also chair of the African American Coalition of Indianapolis, a group of groups that are working in the community to be more engaged in the political process. and I've been involved with youth and community service organizations for much of my professional life, more than 40 years. And I'll share some perspectives about the issues related to wealth creation as it relates to the work that I've been doing over my lifetime.
Fantastic. Thank you, Mr. Bright. I think we're back in the game. I think we're good to go now. So appreciate everybody's patience and working with us here in this virtual space that we live in. Next, I would like to move on to Keanu Davis, CEO and of Mind Your Business Accounting and Consulting. Also integral part in the African American Legacy Fund, as well as a strategic problem solver who envisions smart solutions and executes with urgency. Really happy to have Keanu Davis here today. Please feel free to share some opening remarks.
Well, thank you, Eddie, for this invitation, and all of you. I'm Keanu Davis. I'm also the president of the African American Legacy Fund of Indianapolis, and we are just excited to get this fund up and going. It is a new fund, and a fund that was very much needed for Central Indiana, that brought together our collective dollars, and will continue to bring our collective dollars to address the opportunities and the power in the Black community from a philanthropic perspective. Also, I am the CEO of an accounting firm here in Central Indiana, where I serve businesses and individuals with businesses, nonprofits, and churches. And my focus is not only accounting, but also tax strategy. So thank you for this invitation.
Thank you. Really a pleasure to have you here today. We'll move on to Stephen Jones, Dean of Professional Development and Director of Malcolm X Institute Black Studies at Wabash College, and has a real strong sense of community and social services as a professional. Great experience, immense experience in the banking industry. Has great insight here for today. So thank you for joining us, Mr. Stephen Jones. Please share some opening remarks.
Thank you, Mr. Gill. Appreciate the invitation from InnoPower and the Indianapolis Recorder, as well as Northwestern and all of those who have stepped up to the plate to address a real significant issue in our community. I think more than anything else, what I am most proud of is the fact that we can come together to address the most significant needs that we have and make our community a better place. And so I'm delighted to be with you today. From a professional perspective, I serve on the board of a credit union, and so I see a lot of things that sometimes make me scratch my head. But I think from my perspective, it's about how do we teach a new generation to do some things differently and avoid some of the pitfalls that many of us, have learned along the way. And so delighted to be in a position professionally where I work with young men each and every day to help them find their passion and find their way in life so that they can be productive citizens in regardless to the community that they find themselves in after graduation. So thank you for the invitation. Glad to be here and ready to rock and roll.
Thank you again, Mr. Jones. Really appreciate your presence here today. Really looking forward to your insight. We'll move on to Mr. Aaron Larimer, Senior Program Officer for Local Initiative Support Corporation, also known as LISC. 19 years of experience in this business. He's been involved in millions of dollars invested in jobs, housing, and economic development in local communities, specifically distressed communities. Really interested in hearing about his background, his experience, and how he can provide some solutions for here in local Indianapolis here. So, Mr. Larimer.
Thank you, Eddie. It's good to be with you. I've been here in Indianapolis leading the lending and equity investment work of the Indianapolis office for the past 13 years, and we have enjoyed a significant amount of success. We are very much on the front lines of confronting the challenges of the racial wealth gap and how we can, engage in effective strategies that will close that gap, begin to ameliorate those challenges. Part of the way that LISC does this as the nation's largest community development financial institution is through investments in human capital, physical capital, investment capital in the distressed neighborhoods that we serve, which are overwhelmingly Black and brown communities around the country. At the end of 2019, we're still tabulating the 2020 stats. At the end of 2019, Lisket invested $19 million in Indianapolis neighborhoods. That included $9 million in loan financing, nearly $8 million in equity investment, and about $1.7 million in program grant activity. Supporting efforts that improve the well-being, quality of life in our distressed neighborhoods. I'm happy to be here to talk about some of the strategies and techniques that we use to do that.
Thank you again, Mr. Aaron Larimer. We really appreciate you being here. And I think that's exciting stuff, ways that we can impact local distressed neighborhoods, communities, folks without social capital, without those resources, just being able to provide some of those resources, knowing that it's a difficult struggle, right? We're not going to fix anything overnight. We're not going to quote unquote fix anything in this discussion, but we want to take baby steps, incremental steps towards that progress that we need we need so badly in those Black and brown communities. So with that said, I know in our prep call, Mr. Wills Bright, I know you and I discussed a number of different things, how important it is to, from an education standpoint. I wonder if you can share a little bit of your insight and your experience, not only just the education piece, but other resources that you have seen to be effective and what can be effective moving forward. So with that said, I know in our prep call, Mr. Wills Bright, I know you and I discussed. Mr. Bright, if you can turn down your speaker, that might be helpful, please.
Yes, will do.
From an education standpoint, I wonder if you can share a little bit of your insight and your experience. Not only just.
I would like to start by saying that, like most things, wealth creation begins at home. It begins with the mentality that parents and other significant adults give a child about what's important. Wealth, what is it? It's the abundance of valuable materials, possession. It's the ability to collect things of value and bring them together. And thus how parents demonstrate that themselves in terms of how they utilize resources, how they convert resources from short-term to long-term. And granted, the less you have, the more you have to be able to leverage and parlay that. And I was particularly blessed to be in a family that, first of all, emphasized savings. That was something that was absolutely necessary, as well as work. I got an offer to cut someone's grass. My father loaned me our lawnmower to go do that, and then suggested that I might want to ask some other people if I could cut their yards too. And I then got loaned the lawnmower to do that, and ultimately had to pay for the gas to go in the lawnmower if I was going to be using it. And it goes to say that it had to be clean after I finished using it. Little did I know that those were foundational steps, as I saw he and my mother always say, do you need this or do you just want this? And beginning to make that distinction between needs and wants. My dad, who, because the yellow cab at company and others didn't go into certain neighborhoods, he and some friends of his, they were cabbers. They'd take people to the grocery store, to other places, and all of that. He ended up buying a house. And because he knew people, because he got on the YMCA board, was in the neighborhood association, networking. He knew the banker to go to, and therefore was able to get the loan. The one house led to another, etc. Only point being that I'm watching all of this, not necessarily putting it into economic theory terms, but over time, I began to see that those were foundational things related to how one begins to build wealth over time, and not only create it, but to sustain it. And that is something that is often forgotten. I want to just mention a couple of youth programs that I see that are doing some of that kind of work with young people, because whether it's within the home or whether it's within community-based organizations that are educating young people, those kind of practices, those kind of values, those kind of perspectives can begin to be integrated. First of all, fundamentally, those programs that are asking kids, who are you and what are you? What is it that you do well? How many young people, based on the fact that they were told, hey, you sing well, you do this well, why don't I refer you to XXX and you might be able to perform at that event? You get a little check for doing that. Oh, okay. You may need to have a little brochure to go along with that. There are programs that are beginning to do that, but fundamental to them, it's helping young people understand who they are and beginning to inculcate a set of values within those young people that speaks to the fundamentals that are necessary for entrepreneurship. What are some of those values? Understanding how to begin to leverage, how to begin to have austere living so that you are using only what you need, how to begin to network, how to have the confidence of presentation of self and presentation of your ideas in a concise way, how to begin to cost out what it is you want to do so that you can make a presentation and share that with other folks. Those are some of the fundamentals. A program such as the 100 Black Men, where it actually teaches stock market principles for young people. And there's a competition both at the local level and then at the national level for 100 Black Men chapters around the country. And I'm proud to say that the Indianapolis youngsters have won about 4 of the 7 or 8 events, because we work with University of Indianapolis, their business program, the banks and others come in and they do a session with the men in the 100, and you should see the pencils coming out as the men are listening to these kids talking about what's in their portfolio, in their REIT, in their this, that, and the other, as they're getting and learning from the young people. That's a kind of an activity. There are a number of summer programs that teach kids to do small business repair. Buy them, I was talking about myself, the lawnmowers and starting lawn businesses. All of those kinds of programs that can begin to not only help people begin the process, but setting up accounts and then saving, etc. So long and short of it, entrepreneurial education, wealth creation education has to be put in a value set as well as the technical skills that are necessary. Let me just take a couple of minutes to tell you something that I'm currently involved with that should have great significance for the business community, the Black business community, and in the near future. This past August, the Lilly Endowment contacted the Urban League and the African American Coalition and said, we want to make a significant contribution to improving the quality of life of African Americans in Indianapolis, Marion County. And when the Lilly Endowment calls, it's like E.F. Hutton. Not only do you listen, you get over there as fast as you can. The conversation started with 60, and then by the time it ended, there was a $100 million grant that went to the National Urban League to improve the quality of life of African Americans. As we followed up on work that had been done by the African American Coalition to determine what are some key issues in the community related to housing, related to food deserts, related to healthcare. One of the areas that came out very strongly in these community gatherings were the need for capital resources, for markets, for technology, coaching and mentoring, and other things to build the capacity of the business sector. What we are in the process of doing as we speak, it's just being initiated. Engaging Solutions, an African American women's company, is going out to interview people, and some of you are likely on the list, to say, what do you see as the critical issues that might impact the future quality of life of African Americans? Close in. There are all kinds of surveys, there are all kinds of studies about things, but we wanted to make sure that this work gets face-to-face with people in our community. And so there'll be that kind of portion of the inquiry. The second piece, there are issue groups that are formed. And we have a seasoned African-American businessman, Wayne Patrick, will be the facilitator of the business entrepreneur group. And there will be people from some of those perspectives, business people themselves, capital sources, technical assistance sources, et cetera, will come together, and over a period of a month or so in deliberation will say, we think these are the top 4 or 5 things that at least in a first round of grant making would be enablers of strengthening capacity building, strengthening the technology access, et cetera, of African-American businesses and entrepreneurs. What are the areas that we will do grant making? We don't know yet, because we haven't gone through that process. We want to listen to the community in doing that. But we would hope over the next 4 to 5 years that we will be able to put capital out ourselves, as well as marry it with capital from other sources to create more opportunities to build businesses, but ultimately to increase wealth by strengthening families, by strengthening youth development, by strengthening the overall capacity for us to understand the principles of saving, investing, and retention of resources. So why don't I stop there, and then I can chime in maybe later as we're having some open discussion.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Bright. That's very helpful. And we're getting some messages in the chat about, is this going to be recorded? They can't write fast enough because you got too much good information. So we want to make sure we're able to kind of recap some of those opportunities that you kind of alluded to in during your time. So really appreciate that and all of those resources. I want to move on to Ms. Keanu Davis. In our kind of prep call, we talked about a number of different things, both obviously with your business and then also some of your philanthropic, endeavors. I think you're doing great work in the community. If you can just touch on some of those and any other information or insight you maybe have to provide.
Yeah, I love that you started with Mr. Bright concerning entrepreneurship. I am a business, a 70-hour-a-week grinding it out business. And so I think some of the issues he raised about why Black people don't enter into business and leave what I call earned income into investment income, where I think entrepreneurship starts, is really access to things. There has to be a safety net. I always say that I probably should have been an entrepreneur at 20, but we listened to the messages and I'm not sure if my mom wanted me to stay at home, but that was the safety net we have to offer people, that I think that our colleagues offer young people, that you go out there and start your business. And if you fail, because failure in business will happen, right? We have to be okay to talk about what failure means and how do you pick yourself back up. But there also has to be that safety net for failure, so that when I fail, I'm not living in my car. If I fail, I can get back up and maybe this business plan didn't work. Let me tweak it and move on. And so I didn't start my business until after 40. I won't tell you how old I am, but and that's because I worked in corporate America for a long time, saved my money, and then made a conscientious decision to move on, with really the blessing of my husband to hold things down at home. And so I think for me, I look at income in 3 phases, right? The earned income, which many of us have. We go to work, we earn a paycheck, we get W-2 earnings. And so for me and my business, and I partner with other people, financial advisors for my clients, is how do we move from earned income, taking your hobby into making it a hustle and then making it a legitimate business, so that you get to a point that you go from earned income to kind of this investment income, because you're investing yourself, your money, other people are investing to you, to get to really, when you talk about wealth, is this idea of passive income. That's the income where you sit back, you take the vacations, and there's something that is working in the background for you, whether it is a business operated by a CEO you hired and you live off the residuals of that, whether that's certain assets you have. And so that is the lifestyle for me, or life cycle, I should say, of kind of this idea of wealth creation. And I think a lot of us get stuck in earned income and get a good job, go get an education. But we do have to teach our kids to be less of consumers and be creators. And I think when they continue to hear that message, and I love the story about the lawnmower, because I think we all have that story. My first job was, delivering newspapers. And then what do you do with that money? And so we do have to have those financial literacy classes. But I think the Black community, we have to be able to accept risk and then help those who are risk takers, that when they fail, we will walk alongside them and help them retweak their plan. I do focus on accounting, tax strategy specifically, because I learned real quick in accounting that it's one thing to make money, it's another thing to keep your money. And so my background is in finance and accounting. I've been in the industry for about 22, 23 years. And there is no lie to say that Amazon doesn't pay taxes, right, off of billions of dollars. And it's legitimate, right? It is absolutely legitimate, because our tax law is set up. If you look at the IRS code, the Internal Revenue Code, there's about 2,600 pages of just code. And there's probably 70,000 pages that elaborate on the code. But only 10% of that is about personal tax. The other is about business tax. And I always say, if you want to know where our country wants to make investment, it is not on earned income, it is on business income. And so what they're trying to incentivize us to do is go out there and be entrepreneurs. But a lot of times we don't understand that. And so the movement of the story, the movement of the essence of who we are as Americans, we have to understand that. And if you follow the Internal Revenue Tax Code, you'll understand that. And so that's what I do for my clients, that if they make $100,000 at the end of the year, right, my job is to make sure to minimize their tax liability with all the different tax legitimate loopholes and things like that, to keep their money for reinvestment, so that we can get from now investment income to how do we create plans of passive income, where you can sell your company now. The thing that you invested your last $2,000 in, 10 years from now, we want to get it to X% and be able to sell that company. So now you can live, the rest of your life on a Hawaiian island. So that's what I do with my businesses that I work with, and partner with other financial planners to help them get there. The last thing I want to talk about is just really philanthropy and this idea of where that sits in with all of this wealth creation. And as the president of the African American Legacy Fund, a fund that really was started very differently than some of the other Black funds out there, like in Cleveland, in Columbus, even South Bend, is that we really wanted to build a fund that was based off of everybody's dollar, not just a one-time, $1 million gift, but really a community fund for Black people, where we can really make some significant impacts in these areas. So 3 of the areas that we really want to make significant impact and some investment in is in economics, business, health, and education. And so I hope that if you want to know more, go out to our website. We are a fund of CICF, and we're excited to get started. And we are accepting everybody's dollar, right? So that we can pull our resources together to help solve some of these issues.
Thank you for that, Ms. Davis. Really appreciate that insight here. Obviously, great resources. And I think one of the fundamental things that we have to really understand is, again, this pandemic just hit everyone. It's negatively impacted a number of people a lot more than others. And now, how do we get to that next step? How do we, prepare for the next pandemic or prepare for the next?
So Eddie,
whatever that.
Can I jump in? I'm sorry. To that, I'm a firm believer we rise up to the occasion during downturns. I do. I think there's great opportunity when we think we're at the bottom, right? If you're at the bottom, there's nowhere else to go but up. And I think for some people who found themselves unemployed, underemployed, this is the time to really say, how do I take the things that I know I can create, whether it's services, I can train well, I can speak well, I can bake a cake, I can, all of these things, and how do we monetize that? And that's the discussion we have to have as a part of a collective conversation to say, the only place to go is up. Look, in 2008, what was started in 2008? Square. We do the credit card processing. A lot of the tech companies were started in 2008 when the last downturn we had. And look at them, right? Like when, 15 years ago, we were like, what is this company? And now we can't live our lives without that. And so I think there's a lot of that in us. We just got to pull it out.
Totally agree. When these types of things happens, there's opportunity. There's opportunity out there, and it's just a matter of trying to seize the moment and again, providing the social capital and resources, which is what we're trying to do here today, and moving forward to those folks who have been negatively impacted. Without further ado, let's move on to Mr. Stephen Jones. In our prep call, we talked quite a bit about the importance of recognizing what your credit is about, taking that seriously, acknowledging it, what that means in terms of, for example, a high school student moving on to a collegiate student, and now do I attempt to buy a home, rent a home? What's the importance and what's the significance of having either done? So I know you wanted to touch on some of those things, so I'll let you have the floor.
Thank you, Eddie. So I'm delighted to sit and listen as Willis gave his statement. When you think about icons in the Indianapolis community, Willis has been one for a number of years. And so his discussion about wealth creation beginning at home really hit something with me that stood out. My opportunity to understand what this was about came really from my mother and father, more so my mother, who told me, you need to save for a rainy day. I don't think she had any idea that she was telling me to save for a pandemic and what that would present. But those conversations and, taking the initiative to take me to AFNB to start a Squirrels Club years and years ago has really paid off. And so for those individuals who find themselves, as Mrs. Davis has said, on the bottom, we're all there at one point or another. But the question is, how do we build ourselves back up? And so from my perspective, from working in a bank during after I graduated from high school and during the summers when I was home from college, serving on the credit union board for over 20 years now, there are some things relative to credit score that are just significant. I think I was 21 or 22 years of age, and the president of a bank I had a chance to connect with, who was providing a sense of sponsorship for the Circle City Classic, said to me, Stephen, you're going to be nothing more than your credit score. And at the time, it really didn't make sense to me. But what he said was absolutely true. And so when you think about, applying for loans, when you think about even applying for a job, some jobs require that the organization will run a credit score and take a look at your financial background. And so if you've been in a situation where you have gotten, to the point where you've maxed out all of your credit cards, or you have, tried to apply for 8 different cars in about a 3-month time frame, all of those things are going to impact your credit score. And so I would say to young people, and even to those of us who are a little seasoned, make better decisions about kind of what you are looking to do, and build a relationship with the banker. That's something else that Willis said. I can't reiterate how important that is. whether it's a banker or with a credit union, you need to have a relationship where someone knows you, because, yes, the credit score is critical, but that relationship is also very vital. The other thing that I want to touch on, hopefully there are a few young people on the call today, really investigate how do you get an education without getting a great number of loans. There are scholarships that are available, but you've got to do the work to find them. They're not going to just drop into your lap. You've got to spend some time, on Google, scouring the internet to find those opportunities. But don't forget about, the churches, the civic and the community organizations that could also be there to support you. Now it may not be the Bill Gates, big scholarship, but if you can, put together, several small scholarships, all of those things will make a difference, and you'll be in a better position to compete and build your sense of wealth so that you're not paying off debt once you graduate from college or from technical school, because not everybody's going to go on to college initially. You may need to go get your certification, and that's fine. The most important thing is to do something that will help put you on a pathway to have some sense of economic and financial freedom. One of the things related to that, as we talked about in the prep call, was many people don't believe that they can ever own a home. They spend their life living in an apartment. And I'm saying here from personal experience, believing that when you take the time to investigate, there are typically ways that you can make it happen. Now, you may not be able to go out and buy a 5-bedroom house, but if you're paying $1,000 a month for an apartment, more than likely you can find a way to get into a house, and that is a much better investment. And I think long term it makes sense. And then lastly, before I close, once again, particularly to the young people, think about your retirement, and don't wait until you turn 45. It's much easier to prepare for retirement, at 20, 25 years of age, when you can put in $50 or $100 a week, or, even $100 a month, compared to waiting until you're 45 and then trying to dump $500 a month into a 401k. The compounding that you've missed out on since the age of 20 or 25, you can't put a real value on that. It is significant, and you'll find yourself always trying to get, to the point where you can even think about retirement, because most likely Social Security will not be the answer. You're going to need other options available to you. And so from my perspective, education is critical, whether it's collegiate, or technical. You need to be doing something to prepare yourself. Think about your skills. Think about things that are COVID proof, things that you'll be able to do, and we don't know what the next COVID is going to be, but there's going to be something. And so along those lines, what are you passionate about? What do you enjoy doing? I've always said to the students here on campus, you need to be doing something that you really enjoy, because that's 90% of the battle. If you enjoy what you do, you won't mind getting up every day to go do it. And it will also help you deal with the knuckleheads that you're going to encounter. There are going to be people that you don't like where you work or where you go to school. And so you got to get beyond that and prepare yourself in a way that psychologically you're positive and you're ready to move on to the next challenge. So I've got other things, but I'll stop right there.
Make sure we definitely circle back, because I want to continue to push that conversation. You made some great points there, one of which I'll touch on just by virtue of it being my personal business, and it relates to me all the time. And I see the impact of starting thinking about your retirement early versus starting thinking about it later, and let alone thinking about it, really putting those thoughts into action. A lot of times we are just frozen and paralyzed with thought and indecision. And meanwhile, the clock is ticking, right? The clock is ticking. Days are going by, weeks, months, years, so on and so forth. And next thing you know, you look back and say, man, I wish I would have done just a little bit to begin, my financial management portfolio and those types of things. As lead advisor here with Wise Financial, those are things we talk about and see on the daily. And to your point, Mr. Jones, some people have done a great job of preparing. Some have done less of a great job and really have some work to do. But having said that, the object is to meet everyone where they are and take that next step moving forward in a productive way. So really appreciate you sharing that. Last but not least, Mr. Aaron Larimer. Really appreciate you joining us here today. You've been there on the ice box. We get to get you warmed up here and get you rolling. But again, he's definitely been an integral part of what's going on here in Indianapolis in terms of the investing back into the community, distressed neighborhoods, as we mentioned earlier. Without further ado, I'll let him take it from here.
Okay. So I'm excited at some of the prior conversation. I'm gonna share my screen a little bit here, just to and have that to go through some things. But I was really keying off of what others have said, particularly Kiana talking about recovery and the resilience of the Black community and the idea of unlocking potential. This is very much what LISC has been about and invested in for the last 40 years. When we talk about this issue of closing this racial wealth gap, there are some stark realities that we're pushing up against. In America, in the United States, consumers in general are already over leveraged. With U.S. consumer debt is at an all-time high. This issue is even worse within the Black community. Our middle class continues to shrink with each successive generation since the baby boom, and that trend is also accelerated within the Black community, particularly given the rising costs related to housing and healthcare. A shrinking percentage of the Black community is garnering the income and the assets that are necessary to create generational wealth. And it's a systemic risk, right, to Black America, in the same way that climate change is a systemic risk to the planet. So we've got to address that. And with the events of the last year or two that have really raised the issue of racial equity to the forefront, we have seen an increase in the amount of investment and activity from a variety of sectors, from government, and more so now than recently, from philanthropy and from the corporate sector. 2020, Netflix announced a commitment to steer 2% of its investments into Black-owned financial institutions and businesses. Square, which Gianna mentioned earlier, recently announced a similar 3% commitment. Companies like Costco and Cummins are also investing in racial equity initiatives as well. LISC, as a community development financial institution, which works with philanthropy, government, and the corporate sector to invest in Black and Brown communities around the country, and specifically kind of in the areas of physical investment and human investment and investment capital. We're very up close and personal to the challenges of the racial wealth gap and the effects on the neighborhoods that we serve. And we're always asking the question, then, what are the tactics and strategies that we can use that we can implement to close that gap, to make tangible improvements in that situation. Just like and as an organization, we think through approaches to these kinds of challenges and try to develop strategic approaches to them, of solutions that we apply across the entire network of LISC activity around the country. LISC has been a presence in Indianapolis for the past 30 years, but also has an extensive network of 35 other program offices around the country. So we think through, develop strategies, and then try to deploy them across the entire network as we try to grapple with this challenge of closing the racial wealth gap and of addressing racial equity in community development. The strategy that we have begun articulating is something we call Project 10X. And 10X is really a strategy to deploy resources against this challenge and to do it in a manner that's based on a long-term commitment. Why? Basically because the median wealth of white families is 10 times that of Black families. And 10X's intention is to invest in models and solutions that will create exponential change, not just incremental change. Over the next 10 years, our hope is to invest $1 billion or more in addressing the key drivers of health, wealth, opportunity for Black Americans. In Indianapolis, we need to have extraordinary investments in innovative solutions because we've got significant issues that we're confronting. The statistics are pretty clear and well known to all of us. I think we've all heard the kinds of issues that we're confronting and highlighted in this screen. And so these are the pieces that we're trying to address. And the question that we're asking at LISC is, all right, what are strategies and tactics that we can use that will increase the competitiveness and the well-being of the neighborhoods that we're working in. So 10X is looking to make place-based investments in Black-led organizations, businesses, and developers that seed new ideas and that scale proven approaches in some significant areas. Our objective is really both to deploy innovative solutions that work, but also to scale them to the magnitude of the challenges that we're dealing with. And we are working. So we work very much in a place-based mode, working deliberately in our Black and Brown communities in Indianapolis to make impacts both at the community neighborhood level, but also even driving all the way down to the individual level. It's which is what I'm talking about when we talk about making investments in human capital. So I'll highlight two of sort of these four areas really quickly, which is some of the ideas and things that we're taking a run at, that we're trying to deploy as approaches in Indianapolis and around the country. So when it comes to generating lasting equity and wealth through home ownership and small business ownership, some of the different tools that we use, community investment guarantees that provide a mechanism for lowering risk of lending associated with development projects in Black and Brown communities. The Black Economic Fund, which LISC has created with investments from companies like PayPal and HubSpot, Netflix, Costco Square, and a variety of others. And we'll begin deploying capital from the fund probably in mid-2021 in the form of bank deposits, bridge financing, and other financing to Black-led businesses, financial institutions, and anchor institutions. Micro-equity funds, which are a strategy for addressing investment in Black small businesses. One of the things, in the Indianapolis market, probably about 75 to 80% of Black-owned businesses in Indianapolis are sole proprietor, are organized as sole proprietors. And there's a real challenge and struggle around the types of resources that are available to small businesses to invest and support their growth. Repeatedly, we hear and directly and from partners like the Indianapolis Black Chamber, for example, about the challenge that small businesses find in attracting lending that helps support growth. Perhaps they need to invest in a piece of equipment that's going to help them generate additional revenue, or they need to have a better asset base in their books to attract more capital. But increasingly, they're always finding it very difficult to address that. And when you talk about equity, that's even more difficult, particularly at the level of smaller businesses who are not the type of candidate for equity in the same way that large funds invest in larger operations. Other tools, neighborhood enterprise investments, which are equity-like investments in social enterprises that deliver on that triple bottom line, both in terms of being sustainable from a profitability standpoint, but also delivering a benefit at the community level. And one of the other things that I think is a significant point regarding closing the wealth gap. When we think about the issue of workforce development, we have a significant portion of the population who are low-skilled workers, and so they are locked into low-wage earning jobs. And so one strategy for moving the needle on that is moving low-skilled workers into the middle skills category. Now, what that does is it completely changes their economic mobility picture, because now they are able to earn higher wages. They become eligible for entry-level positions in areas like advanced manufacturing, for example, which in the Midwest is a major opportunity area. And that change creates 50 to 100% improvement in their gross income, and it puts them into jobs that have actual career mobility, as opposed to low skill positions that don't offer any actual mobility. You can work extensively, but you're not really making much in the way of mobility. So those are pieces that we work on through our Bridges to Career Opportunity efforts, and in investing in job creating commercial and industrial development that creates jobs that have actual career mobility. So those are some of the different ways, different strategies and tactics that we try to put on the ground, that we take the dollars that we raise, over $2 billion in 2020 alone, and try to apply them at the local level. So I'll stop right there.
No, that's great stuff. No, really appreciate that, Mr. Larimer. I'm going to stick with you for one moment. You mentioned something there about midway through the presentation that I thought was really important and really impactful. I want to see if you can dive into it just briefly here a little bit more. You mentioned the Black and brown community being over leveraged far more than anyone else. Can you just define what being over leveraged is? And then B, how do we get out of that position, whether you're middle class, lower middle class, at a poverty level, wherever you may be in your journey? Because I've seen it on all scales of people being over leveraged. Again, define what that is, and then B, what are steps that we can take to potentially get out of that, especially when you're talking about coming off of the pandemic?
Well, at a personal level, that's essentially having more debt than you have assets and income to support. So that leaves you in a very vulnerable position, and we have a large component of the population that's experiencing that. And that's not limited to low income earners. That's true right across the spectrum, from low to middle to even high income earners. LIST tries to address that through our Centers for Working Families and our Bridges to Career Opportunities work that focuses in on a variety of things, self-sufficiency issues like budgeting, providing income supports, providing employment supports to help people who may be unemployed or underemployed to move into employment, as well as Bridges to Careers Opportunity efforts that try to address that skills issue to help people move into a middle skills arena where they have the opportunity to earn an above poverty wage, a family sustaining wage, and have more gross income, and thereby be better able to support their families and to support the community in which they live, where they buy goods and services as well. And that's important in terms of small business development as well. So all these things are interrelated and they're linked.
I think that's huge. And another word you mentioned there is very fundamental, and many of us just kind of bypass it, and that's just budgeting, right? What do I have coming in? What do I need to sustain myself and my family? Bills, food, those types of necessities. Like I think Mr. Bright, you mentioned it early. We need to define, and I talk to my kids about this all the time. They're always making the comment, "Hey, I need X, Y, Z." Okay, well, hold on a second. We need to pull out this dictionary and define what a need is. So again, define that versus what do I need to sustain myself. That's really, really important. As we move forward. Mr. Jones, I want to come back to you for one thing. Mr. Bright, can you turn that speaker down? My kids about that, please. Mm-hmm. Thank you. Mr. Jones, wanted to come back to you, and I know you had a couple items to share. Along with those items, can you you mentioned one thing in your kind of presentation, referencing credit score, right? So if I'm a family or an individual, I'm supporting myself, my family. I've done all I can do, lost my job, I've maxed out credit cards, all of these types of things that negatively impact my credit score.
Yeah.
What are some of those small things that I can do to try to climb out of that hole?
Yeah, I think more than anything else, survival mode causes us to think about a lot of different things. And so we want those necessities met. What I would argue is that, and I've seen this happen, where family at some point gets into trouble and maybe they put a cable bill in their son's name. And the son, makes it through college, is ready to graduate, has a job offer is extended, they run the background check, finance check, and he doesn't pass because of something that's in his history from 10, 15 years ago. And so I think more than anything else, it's about really looking at making better decisions. Do you need a Cadillac or do you need just a vehicle to get you back and forth to work? And so don't overextend yourself. As Aaron said, budgeting, I'll admit, when I was young, I hated to think about a budget. It's like, I don't have that much money coming in. I don't want to see that I don't have it coming in. And so I really stayed away from it. But once I got to the point of saying to myself, Stephen, if you're going to get out of this rut, you've got to create a budget. And so I think all of that ties into the credit score, understanding exactly where you're at. If you're at a 580 today, you can get to a 700, a 750, maybe even an 800 if you think about paying these bills on time. Look at my credit card that has the highest interest rate. Let me focus on that one and try to pay a little bit more on that one to get it knocked out. But don't go then create, 2 more accounts. Don't overextend yourself. And I will tell you that, most of us, when we were on a college campus, you got a credit card offer every other day. And some of us then started stealing from Peter to pay Paul when that one became due. And so you just can't put yourself in that position. So, decision making, looking at alternatives to find your passion, pick up, a second job, doing something that you like. I worked for the Indianapolis Star-News years ago, and I can't tell you how many white carriers I saw who were adults who picked it up as a way to pay the expense for their child to get through college or some other, investment that they wanted to make. And so it's a way to do it, but you have to think outside the box and not be too proud to say, what, I may be down here today, but I'm going to get up here. And so I'm going to create a relationship with a banker, someone at a credit union, and we're going to, get into some programs as Willis and Aaron have alluded to that will allow me to get to the point where I'm a 750 or 800, And when you talk to someone who doesn't know what their credit score is, that's really alarming.
Thank you for that. Yeah, I'm coming to you right now, Ms. Davis. I was going to ask you about because as he's speaking, I'm thinking about you, and you're probably seeing a lot of this.
Well, first of all, I see a lot of this, not only on the individual side, but the business side. First of all, people have to know in the pandemic we're in, you can renegotiate debt. You need to go and call your creditors today. First of all, stop being afraid of opening mail. That's the biggest issue I find with some of us. We don't even want to open our mail because we don't want the bad news. Well, guess what? We created the bad news. Let's deal with it. And so prioritize that. Your mortgage can be renegotiated in this time. A lot of your utilities can be renegotiated. I think a lot of times, and Stephen can maybe confirm this, but if you're connecting with creditors and you're actually communicating with them, they will help you. A lot of times we don't communicate with them. And so I have clients who I just say, we're going to call Chase and renegotiate and if you can't make your payment, you got laid off, you lost your job, let's do something now. So one, it doesn't affect your credit score as much as avoiding the issue will be. So I just want to encourage people that even in a pandemic, there's help. And there's practical ways to stay above board. And I'm telling you, if most of us have a hobby, I just take your hobby, sell something. I don't like sell something. Whether you consider that a second job or not, just sell something to bring in additional income. So that's all I wanted to say.
I appreciate that. And Mr. Bright, I mentioned one of the most fundamental things I think of all this, if not the most fundamental, and that's the education piece. If you'd like to expand on that and obviously share a little bit more, Mr. Bright.
I wanted to pick up on something that Aaron was speaking to, and that we will also be needing to deal with the African American Quality of Life Initiative. And that is the capacity of organizations to both define the issues that they want to do something about, to have the infrastructure and staffing to be able to do something about it, to have the financial management and acumen to know what resources are required to do the work, and then to have the evaluative capacity to be able to let people know that you did what you said you were going to do. We cannot assume that everybody has that knowledge. And in many cases, a lot of organizations, as well as individuals, which Keanu was speaking to, don't have the knowledge. Part of what has to be done if one is going to not only build wealth, but build credibility, is to know what you don't know and to be willing to go ask people, whether it's to slide into a class, whether it's to pay for somebody to tell you what it is that you might be able to do. Because the reality is, ultimately, if you try to do something, however well intentioned, but you don't have the capacity to do it, it's going to show up, blow up, and impede you from doing what you want to do in the future. And I know both LISC and we are going to be doing some parallel things to build the capacity of organizations before trying to dump a lot of capital in them. Because resources are so limited, we have to make very good investments in what we do. And therefore, they have to be with organizations that have the best chance. The idea, well, just give us the money and we'll no, it doesn't work that way. We'll give you the money, but we'll also give you the skills to be able to utilize it. Sometimes one's going to be in advance of the other, but they're not going to be separated, because whatever it is, whether it's an individual loan or individual grant or whatever, what happens afterward? We want organizations to have the capacity that when our initiative is gone, when LIST is gone, that you can then go back to the existing funding entities in town and get the support that you need, whether it's as an individual family, individual business, to get that loan, to get that support that you need to continue to build wealth in your family and for you as an individual.
And maybe let me dive in just a little bit there on that issue of capacity building. That's really critical and important. It's extraordinarily important in the context of community development work, because as a financial intermediary organization, we don't build the housing, we don't create the economic development project, we don't run the CWF or the BCO site. We support the organizations, the frontline organizations that do that work. And one of the challenges of that approach and that relationship is always the capacity of the organizations, our partners in the communities that we're working with. And in the Black community, many of our nonprofit partners and community partners have always operated from some level of deficit in funding, in personnel, in organizational skill set. This has always been the case. And in particular, when you talk about community development investments, where in the last, since the 70s, we had an evolution of nonprofit organizations, particularly in the form of community development corporations, that evolved to address these physical investment challenges in the same way that community centers evolved to address and respond to social social issues. Those addressing those physical investment issues means confronting a whole host of technical challenges in communities and pushing back on disinvestment trends and problems that are longstanding and have existed for quite some time, and that are interrelated and interconnected, and they're not easy to address. And so this challenge of capacity is really important, in particular when you talk about community development corporations, for example, or any community-based organization that finds itself trying to play a leadership role in physical investment in its neighborhood, whether that's housing or economic development. The ability to competently manage funds and money, and not just manage money, but being able to manage different types of money. So, for example, if you are in a community-based organization attempting to address broad swaths of issues in neighborhoods, that requires you to be able to tap into many different types of financing and sources of support, whether that's philanthropic or government support or fees for service, whatever that is. And all those sources many times come with different types of strings attached, and you have to make those things work together, and you have to be able to properly account for them. So that's one type of capacity challenge that we see in our organizations. Other types are, who's your personnel? What's your organizational development strategy? How do you make sure that your organization is really clicking on all cylinders to deliver your mission? And investing in the capacity of these organizations to operate better as organizations, to better account for the dollars that they use, better invest them, and better invest in their people is also critically important to go along with the investments that we're making in the work that we wanted to do. Very often, what we see from corporate and philanthropy is investments in the program, but not much in the way of investments in the more unsexy aspects of basic organizational development. But that's really, really critical if our partners that we're supporting are going to deliver on the mission in the neighborhood.
That's good stuff. I really appreciate you adding that, Mr. Larimer. That's important. The capacity is a huge piece of it. One of the other components, along with making sure we're building up capacity for the community, is how do we build trust within the community when they have these different opportunities. We're always hearing about and seeing about, myself personally, I see it, the apprehension to divulge and just kind of let their guard down and say, hey, I need assistance. I know you have those resources, but yet I'm still a little bit reluctant to just open up to some of these different conversations, whether it be with a financial advisor, whether it be with an accountant, whether it be with a real estate agent, some of these different pieces. I'd just like to get you all feedback. Feel free to chime in on kind of how do we combat the lack of trust that may be in the community.
I would just say relationships are vital, and you can't be afraid to sit, alone in your office and try to figure it out yourself. It takes all of us. It takes a village to make this work, and that's white, brown, blue, black. And so that would be my perspective. You can't do it alone. So ask the question and learn something in the process so that you can then help someone else and bring them along.
In the community development.
Go ahead, Aaron.
Ladies first.
Go ahead. Okay. I come from a different perspective because I think majority of my businesses are Black-owned businesses that I support. And they have to divulge a lot of personal information to me in order for me to support them. And I would tell you, first of all, if you are a business owner serving Black people, you got to learn the language of Black people. You have to learn the culture of Black people. And I always speak of the Black community out of a place of power, that what we have is to be valued, and it is a place of dignity. And just because some of my clients initially would come in the spirited way Black people come. And at first it was, oh my God, I don't know if I can serve them, right? They're not listening. They don't trust me. And what I had to learn and honestly pray about is, I have the discernment, I have the capacity, I have everything I need to speak to my people the way they want to be spoken to, and I can receive how they're speaking to me, and I can cut through, right, some of the maybe sometimes the flamboyancy of the way they're presenting stuff and help them. A lot of businesses can't, their business structure isn't set up for that. We need more businesses who can speak the language of Black people. We need more community-based organizations who can speak the language of Black people, right? Just because we don't come to you the way that is taught in business school doesn't mean that our dollar does not have dignity. It does. And I think as we go into business and we want to serve Black people, I think once that's how you establish trust, that the way they come to you is dignified in the services you're going to offer them. So when they come to me, regardless of how they come to me, I want them to know they left there with what I'm offering everyone, right? They left there with a quality of service that they feel like I've listened to them. What they're presenting to me is a value, that I value them and what they're doing. And I think that's how you establish trust in our community. But you got to learn our language.
And I'll follow up on that.
Kiana, I think that's where a lot of the work that is going on now with companies, with foundations and others around diversity and equity, what it's about is trying to get institutions to be able to be inherently respectful of the people they're dealing with, and to understand not only the cultural nuances, but to also assume that just because you have something that somebody needs, that does not give you the prerogative of lording that over them or presenting it in a way that assumes that certain things are understood. So part of the exchange has to be, here's why we need this information. Here's what we will do with it. Here's how it connects to the things, first of all, that you've identified that you want and need. And I think that most people, if they have a respectful presentation of both why information is needed, what are the sets of related activities that must be achieved in order for something to be done, most people are willing to comply with that. But if you don't have that, people are likely going to stonewall and be self-protective, even at times if it may be against their own best interests. But it starts with, how do we respect those with whom we're engaging, and especially institutions that ought to sort of assume that people ought to know at certain levels when that may not be the case.
You know, and black people and black organizations have experience with a history of data and information being provided and then used to harm them, right? So you know, we sometimes say here at LISH, community development moves at the speed of trust. And one of the things, certainly from the standpoint of funders and resource providers, is, you know, trust goes both ways. So we expect the community-based organizations and entities that we work with to provide information and to be forthright. But it's also incumbent on us to operate in some transparency and candor as well. I mean, I can't recount the number of times I've seen situations where a funder is interacting with an organization that is clearly in distress, clearly has challenges that are that are very much aware, that the funder is very much aware of, but we engage in a conversation with the organization as though we don't know that these problems are happening, and conversely, the organization engages in a conversation.
I think we lost Aaron.
Muted myself accidentally. Sorry about that. Yeah. So,
you go.
Willis, you've probably seen this kind of problem any number of times where organizations operate as though as though their problems are not known. And the challenge of that is building trust, building relationship, as Stephen referred to address and engage what those problems in an organization are, so that the resources that a funder has can be successfully deployed and an organization can successfully grow and improve in its organizational development.
And I think it's interesting to really think about how Black and brown people are becoming the new majority, and what impact that has on business people and organizations who are then in a position to make loans and to provide the kind of support that makes it a sustainable situation for those organizations that are trying to rise and build up.
No, that's great. No, I really appreciate that. As we wrap up here, we got about 14 minutes. I want to be respectful of everyone's time, but I think the education piece is huge. I want to come back to you, Mr. Bright, because you did mention it earlier. As people are families and are in their homes and trying to educate young people and also educate themselves, I think we can all benefit from some education in some shape, form, or fashion. What are 2 or 3 things that you think would be just imperative that young people are starting to grasp and take hold of and really implement as they get older, to really try to create a situation where they're able to close this gap and take it upon themselves to make those necessary steps? I think you're on mute, Mr. Bright.
Would you say again about families? What families?
It's imperative that young people are starting to grasp. Yeah, you want to turn your speaker down just a little bit for me?
Yeah,
to really try to create a situation where they're able to close this gap.
Okay.
Yeah, so I just came to you with you mentioned the education piece. I was saying, what are things, in your opinion, 2 or 3 things that are most important that they can really try to put in play and implement as their youth get a little older?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think we've all kind of talked about understanding in some ways that wealth creation is a lifestyle. It's a lifelong proposition, that it is more than work and it's more than income. It's about every choice you make about how resources will be gathered and how they will be used. And thus, many families sit around a table or the living room or whatever and sort of talk about, this is how much we've got. What do we do with it? Here's what we need. Here's what we want. How do we make that done? Games, Monopoly. Many of us didn't think much about it, but the old game of playing Monopoly taught us some of the principles that are involved in wealth creation and wealth generation, seeking out those kind of activities that families can do. Asking people who are in particular areas that your child might be interested in, could you spend a half an hour talking to my kid about what it means to be a university staff person or to be an accountant or do that? Most adults are more than willing to give time to talk to young people about what it is they do. And one of the things that when we have our career days, we don't ask people to come in and talk about where they live and what kind of car they have. No. We want them to talk about, what course did you take to become that accountant? What are the things you do now that you are accountant to stay on your game, so that people understand it doesn't stop when you get a degree or a certification, that there's ongoing development, and letting people understand that kind of thing. And more than anything, having high expectations that you yourself model doing the best you can with what you are doing, that you're always, your child, your relatives see that you're always in the process of self-improvement, that you're always letting them go with you when you go to the bank and they hear you do a transaction and doing a negotiation, so that certain things become ordinary. They are just part of the being of your day-to-day fabric. And that, to me, is things that families can do, is educate, network, put your children in programs where they are getting that kind of financial literacy, education, personal development, and then being able to model it and reward them accordingly.
I think that's great. Would anyone like to add anything to that piece in terms of the education? Those are, because some of these items are it's a tall mountain to climb, and we have to start again at a very foundation standpoint. Anything we'd like to add to that?
I think what Mr. Bright is doing, we need more navigators and connectors, because it's a lot of information out there. A lot of times people don't know where to start. And so I am glad to hear about the initiatives that AACI has taken on. And honestly, if you don't know where to start, I would suggest that you connect to Mr. Bright. I'm not trying to blow his email up, because he has his hands on private and public kind of partnerships out there. And I just think it's going to take all of that to kind of, close this gap here. Financial literacy is important, not only as a young person, but even as you get older, it is important. And so there are resources out there that are free that you can connect to. And for anyone who, I always offer a free 30 or 60-minute sit down with anybody thinking about going into business from a financial literacy perspective, or, my encouragement from hobby to hustle. What does that look like? And so there are many of us out there. Connect with NABA, the National Association of Black Accountants. They have a lot of information out there for free. A lot of us are in the industry, and there to help with financial literacy.
And I would just add that it's education, exposure, and experiences, because the experiences become very vital once you've been exposed to it. If you don't have a hands-on experience to say, yes, this is really what I think I want to do, that sense of passion is never developed. And so education, exposure, and experiences are what I think are critical for young people.
I would echo all of that and encourage us as adults to be very focused and leaning into how do we create the opportunity for our young people to be successful, to tap into opportunities to both further their education, but also to garner the skills and the thinking that are involved in entrepreneurship and creating wealth and being tapped into their community as well, so that wealth creation isn't just about you, but it's also about the community you come from.
Yeah, no, that is great stuff. It's incredibly important. We see it every day here. Again, in my profession, some people are very well versed in the finances and retirement planning, and others are not. So we just get down to wherever they are and meet them in that place, because I think it's truly important, especially when you're dealing in my business, and I'm sure in everyone's business, having a fundamental understanding of what we're doing, right? And then we're doing, and then why we're doing it.
Eddie, I have a question for you.
Absolutely.
One of the things that, and I'm partnering with another company that is in estate planning, is life insurance, right? How life insurance is also a generational wealth creator that sometimes we don't talk about. And because we have this thing, I ain't leaving nobody money when I'm dead, right? And the reality is that we can create generational wealth through the investment of life insurance. And I would love your perspective quickly on that.
That's a fantastic question, and that is something that we talk about daily, because first and foremost, a lot of times people view life insurance as surely a death benefit, right? And if you're a single person, you're like, hey, I don't need life insurance. I don't have anybody I'm leaving money to. I don't have any family, so on and so forth. But to your point, it definitely can be a big piece of the legacy planning. Not only that, but it's also can be an asset depending on the type of life insurance you have. Being able to pull from it in retirement as your own asset. We talk about this all the time. I think most of us here on this call are in an accumulation phase, right? So we need to figure out the appropriate buckets to put money into. So when we hit retirement phase and we're in a distribution phase, we know which buckets to pull out money from in a tax efficient way. And life insurance can be one of those things to where you can use it as an asset. It also has death benefit. You can make sure you handle it and address your legacy planning, being able to leave for others. And again, how do we create generational wealth? That is one huge piece of the puzzle. What we do here is comprehensive financial planning. It's not just investments, it's also the risk management side of things, which is incredibly critically important. So I appreciate that question. That is a huge one, again, that we address all the time. And sometimes we find folks that are completely well-versed and understand how it works, and we walk them through the fundamentals of it. And again, there's others that don't understand, and that's perfectly fine, because it's not everyone's business to know that every single day. So ultimately, we have a fundamental understanding, but it is critically important to an overall financial plan for sure. With that said, I'm sorry, you had something, Mr. Brett?
Yeah. In addition, I would just add, in terms of insurance, employer matches. Taking advantage of employer matches, or when there's opportunities, stock options within the company that you're working with. The reality is that retirement is a whole different scene than it was 30 years ago, where people left with a pension and Social Security and all that. The current reality is people are expected to create their own wealth. They are expected to do their savings, their investing in a way that will sustain them once they're retiring, because many companies are not giving company-based pensions anymore. And I've been in situations where people had opportunities to take advantage of matches, but said, I can't afford to take a match and to give up the 5% or 10%, or anytime your company goes above 15%, you cannot not take advantage of that and learn to live on what you've got and invest the residual when you get a raise into further investment. So that's a reality too, in terms of insurance, starting with term insurance that can be very cheap for young people, and then catapulting that into some other kinds of things. Some very basic things. Just one last quick thing. We, as a people, spend more money proportionally on technology than others. That is, cell phones and all of those kinds of things. With a cell phone, you can do a financial education. You can go on Google, you can go on other areas and get information about business development in the privacy of your home, your car, etc. It's taking the things that we immediately have available to us and accessing knowledge that gives us either the comfort to go into spaces where we get it more formally, or to be able to make ourselves a bit more knowledgeable so that we can trust those who do have information and trust our own decisions. So taking that technology, whether it's a computer, whether it's an iPhone, whether it's a pad, and looking up whatever it is you want to need before you even go into situations.
Yeah, thank you so much. I really appreciate that. The fundamentals of are key. I think we've shared that over and over here again. And I think it's really important to drive the point home that you can start from where you are, no matter how high or low we may be. It's never too late. It's never too early. Start where you are and trying to build towards something different for you and your family. That's what this entire series is about, trying to get this gap closer and closer and closer, and everyone starting where they are and really just trying to see a true impact there. I want to, again, thank all of our panelists here, Keanu Davis, Stephen Jones, Aaron Larimer, Mr. Willis Bright. Really thank you all for your presence. Thank Emil Ekior at InnoPower, Robert Shagog with the Indianapolis Recorder, Wise Financial, which is where I'm currently residing and living and breathing. But again, really thank everyone for their time. Feel free to reach out if you have any questions or any concerns or suggestions. Again, just want to be able to provide that social capital and resources to those who otherwise do not have it. So again, want to thank you for your time.
Been a pleasure.